Hello everyone, it's Karina with Karina Loves to Plan and Lucy because she decided that she wanted to be part of this. Thank you for joining me in my little corner of the internet where we're going to talk all things planners, fountain pens, and fountain pen inks. Today, yes, I know that the thumbnail was a little bit clickbaity and I apologize for that, but it's also April Fool's Day. So I thought it was the best time to be able to go over things that I do not like about the fountain pen hobby. And this can be a mix of things such as individual items in the fountain pen ink and fountain pen world, or it could be things that are associated with the overall community and the overall hobby. So stay tuned, and I'm going to try and get through my list as quick as I can because this one is already so distracting. All right, let's get started. First things first, if you have ever tried a Pilot pen, then you would have tried this little thing. Yeah, exactly. This is the Pilot Con 40. Many people do not like this converter. I know I'm starting off tame with my things that I don't like about the fountain pen hobby, but the Pilot Con 40, if you are a person who is just starting out in the fountain pen hobby and you're trying out your first Pilot, which could be a Pilot Kakuno, for example, and then you decide I'm going to buy a converter that goes with it, and you try the Con 40, for one, it holds such a ridiculously low amount of ink. And two, even when you try to fill it all the way, it's so hard to get a full fill in this ridiculous little thing. Pilot does so many things well in terms of engineering, but the Con 40 is where Pilot just falls short. So, they have the Con 70, which is fantastic. I think the Con 50 or the Con 20 is the one that's in the Pilot Metropolitan, the squeeze converter. I don't like that one either because you can't even see the level that you're filling it up to. And yes, you can use a syringe to fill this, but I just don't like it. I just don't like it. And I try to avoid using this where I can. I don't use it in my Pilot Vanishing Point. I don't use this in my Kakunos. I use the Con 70 in my, now you've distracted me, my Kakunos. And then I actually fill a converter with a syringe for my Pilot Vanishing Point. So basically trying to find any way to not use this. So my first hate or dislike in the fountain pen hobby is the Pilot Con 40. Putting that to the side here. All right, the second thing that I actually dislike or hate about the fountain pen hobby, unfortunately, are sheening inks. And please don't come at me. This is actually more like a sensitivity that I have. I wish I liked sheening inks because I love the fact that you have the base color and then something so shiny. I love shiny things, but not when it comes at the expense of my light sensitivity and headaches. I suffer from migraines that can be caused by light sensitivity. And when I'm writing or when I have written with sheening inks, the light reflecting off the sheen has given me headaches, which is why I stay away from them. But also, a lot of the sheening inks that I've ever tried take forever to dry, forever. I'm trying to remember one of was it nitrogen? It was an ink that I tried when I first started in this fountain pen hobby, and I thought I was going to love it. Realized it sheened like crazy and it took forever to dry. Definitely one of my regrets from early on in my fountain pen career. But nowadays I really do try to stay away from sheening inks. I know that there's going to be inks that have a little bit of sheen anyway when you do your swatching, but generally I try to stay from inks that are labeled sheen. You know me, I like my shading, I like my shimmer. That's my wheelhouse and that's where I stay. But for me, sheening inks, because of the fact that they have caused me migraines, I stay away from them and I unfortunately do not like them. Yeah. So for those who love sheening inks, great, amazing. But for me, it's just a headachy thing. Yeah, I don't like them because of that. All right. The third thing that I do not like about the fountain pen and ink hobby is now specifically for fountain pen inks. It is bottles like the Ferris wheel press bottles that make it very difficult to fill a pen. Aesthetically very pleasing and beautiful, but functionally, you can't fit a pen in there. And the likelihood that I'm going to knock this over and spill all the ink is very high. The design is gorgeous, but when it comes to day-to-day use of being able to fill a pen with this, there is so much risk of me tipping these over and then spilling all the beautiful ink. So, and I think this is feedback that Ferris Wheel Press have also received about a lot of their bottles, is that they're difficult to use, and just the fact that they are more liable to spill and fall over. And I'm sure they've heard this. So they created what they called the carousel instead to be able to hold the bottle. But that doesn't really address the design issue. Instead, they've created another product for consumers or fountain pen hobbyists to buy to then place your bottle in. So it hasn't really solved the problem. It's just created another product that you have to buy so that Ferris Wheel Press doesn't have to change its design. Yeah, I would rather have function so that I don't spill the ink. I mean, for me personally, like, I don't keep my fountain pen ink bottles on a shelf for a display. Mine are in a drawer, protected from the sun and all of that. So I don't need these, pretty bottles displayed everywhere. And I appreciate those that do collect the ink bottles for the aesthetic look of them. But for me personally, I would rather have something that I'm not afraid to knock down and spill every single time that I ink it up. But also these tiny bottles, you can only fill your pen if you take it out with a syringe. So yeah. I don't know what else I can say about that. Like, it's beautiful, but not at all functional. So what are we on? Third thing that I dislike about the fountain pen and ink hobby are bottles that are pretty but dysfunctional. There's so many beautiful designs of bottles in there, or like, for example, Diamine, they keep it simple. And it's not even made of glass, those plastic bottles. I love those ones. Whereas like Pilot, they have beautiful glass bottles that are functional and also still look beautiful for its simplicity. So you don't have to have such intricate designs in order to be beautiful. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. All right, next thing. This is the thing that I really disliked or even hated when I first started in the fountain pen hobby, is the difference in nib sizes and even the inconsistency in the same nib size category. So for example, a fine nib is going to be a different size in a TWSBI versus a Pilot. For example, a fine nib on a Platinum 3776 is even going to be different to a fine nib on a Pilot Kakuno. So when you're starting out and you're trying to tell someone or recommend to someone what the best nib size for them would be, you're then overloading them with so much information of, well, if you really, really like this, then you should try this, but then not this because it's going to be too broad. Or for example, like a fine nib in a Pelican is more like a broad for someone who enjoys Pilot nibs, for example. So that inconsistency between the nib sizes, I know that's something that can't necessarily be solved, but it would be nice to have that, like, a little bit more consistency between the sizes. But I don't mind. I think I've been in this hobby for 4.5, almost 5 years, that I've learned what I like. So I've tried out enough that I've learned my preferences for nib sizes. But when you're starting out, it can be really confusing and overwhelming to see the different ranges of nib sizes, but know that it's kind of a crapshoot, really, if you're just starting out and you're like, I want to try a fine. Well, is it a fine in a TWSBI? Is it a fine in a Pelican? Is it a fine in a Pilot? Or even a fine in like a Kaweco, for example. All of these could be so different, and that could really make or break someone's first fountain pen experience. So yeah, and also I've had people come up to me, but ask questions in YouTube videos about, which size of nib that I recommend. And it's really hard to give a recommendation because there are so many variations in the different sizes as well. So yeah, it's one of those things that I really don't like. And I know that there's nothing I can really do to change that, unfortunately, but I can gripe about it. Another thing about nibs that I also don't like and actually hate is the inconsistency in quality control between different companies. So for example, Pilot, amazing quality control. You know that a fine nib is going to write excellent and be consistent across, your Pilot Vanishing Point and your Pilot Kakuno and your Metropolitan. But then you have some other companies where they are known for their inconsistent quality control. And okay, I'm going to name names. Like, I don't own one, but I've heard from many people's experiences with their Visconti that they've always had to budget for a nib tune and smooth because they just know how inconsistent the quality of the nib is. Even in the gold nib or the titanium nibs that they've had in the past, they've still had to have them tuned and smoothed because the quality control just wasn't there. And I've actually experienced this with my Aurora. I paid a lot of money for my Aurora, but it was not a smooth writing experience right out of the box. So that's one of the things that I hate, is that for some of these higher priced pens, the amount that you're paying for doesn't necessarily guarantee a smooth writing experience. And you think it would. You'd think that for a certain amount of money, that quality control for making sure that the nib actually writes well is there. But unfortunately, it isn't always. So yeah, I think a lot of you would agree with me that the quality control within certain brands is missing or inconsistent, and we wish that it wasn't. So, and I think that's why it's also put me off from trying any Visconti, because of other, friends' experiences with their nib and what they've seen. So I may try one eventually, but it's not one that I would just order and spend over $500 on without ever having tried the nib. I think I would more likely try one at a pen show, see how I feel about it, and if I like it, then maybe buy it. But then at a pen show, I'll also have resources like Herc Spear of Penrealm or other nib meisters who can then tune and smooth it for me. So yeah, nib quality control. Next. Oh, how do I want to go about this? Oh, okay. Going on with nibs again. The whole gold versus steel argument. What I don't like about the whole gold versus steel argument, and actually what I really hate about the argument, is that when some people think that gold is always going to be better and judge those who don't prefer gold, for example. And that's going to lead me to another point that I don't like about the fountain pen hobby. But gold isn't always better than steel. In some cases, in some brands, it definitely can be. But I think it also really comes down to personal preference. I love the way my Pilot Kakuno, the Pilot steel nib, writes. It's beautiful, smooth. I could write with it for days. I prefer writing with that than the 18 karat nib on my Aurora. And I paid way more money for that Aurora. And that 18K should write better. But I prefer the Pilot Kakuno, which is why I always have a Pilot Kakuno inked up. So it's not really gold is always better than steel. I think that, again, down to personal preference. And if you decide that you like steel nibs better than gold nibs, then that's great. You don't have to spend a ton of money on gold nibs if you don't necessarily like them. But again, it depends on the brands. It depends on personal preference. But one isn't always necessarily, overall better than the other. And just because one person prefers gold nibs doesn't make their collection or their preferences better than somebody who prefers steel nibs. And that takes me into the next point that I really hate about the fountain pen hobby is the judgment. And I see this a lot. I see this in like Reddit threads or Facebook groups or things like that, or even some YouTube videos where people are just very outright judgmental of other people's collections. It comes down to, they judge people on how many pens they have, how few pens they have, which pens they have, how much they're spending their money, or how much money they're spending on their pens. There's just so much judgment that I end up seeing, or people are like, I don't understand why that person would buy that. And you don't have to understand it. It's not necessarily your business to understand why that person has their collection. You're never going to fully understand that person's budget, that person's place in their life, what their preferences are. And even if they outlined all of that for you, which they don't ever have to, that's none of your business, our tastes are so different. Two people can have the exact same budget, but they can choose completely different pens with that same amount of money. And that's absolutely okay. There is room for everyone in this fountain pen hobby, whether you only have 10 pens versus over 500, or the pens that you prefer are your Jinhaos or your Mahjong versus those who really love their Viscontis or their Pelicans or things like that. There's room for everyone in this fountain pen hobby, and there is no room for judgment. People will have collections that are so different from yours, and we don't have to understand why they like what they like. It's a hobby. It's a collection. This is supposed to be fun. Why are we judging other people for what they have? Honestly, this is the thing that I have thought about actually ever since entering this hobby. And I think this exists in other hobbies as well, not just the fountain pen hobby, but this exists in hobbies where collections are a huge part of that. And why the judgment exists, I don't know. And not to say that I'm not guilty of ever, judging others, because I'm human, but I'm also aware of the fact that we're all different, we're all human, we're all in this hobby for different reasons. So why shouldn't our collections look completely different? Right? Right. And that leads to, I guess, another thing that I don't like about this hobby in general. And I hate sounding so negative, but the whole consumerism and FOMO that surrounds this hobby. And I am guilty for being a part of that, especially having a YouTube channel and having affiliate links and things. So I know that I am not exempt from that. But the consumerism, I've really noticed it in the last even couple of years or so, where it feels like there is a new release every single week, not even every month, but every single week. There's a new release. There's a new color of a same model of pen. There's just different collaborations. There's just always something new. And it can be very overwhelming for the senses if there's always something new. It can be very overwhelming for the budget if there's always something new. And I admire those who have collections that are classic and stay within their allotted pens. Like, for example, Helen of the Coffee Monsters Co. posted a few weeks ago her fountain pen collection, and I love the rules that she has for herself, and her collection is very classic. And I know, for example, Tom Otto of Gold Spot Pens, he has only a collection of maybe like 10 or 12 pens. And I mean, he has the advantage of being able to play with pens at Gold Spot all the time, but his core collection is very curated and not affected so much by all of the trends or all of the new things that are happening in the fountain pen hobby and the fountain pen community. And I think at the same time, it's also great that there's so many collaborations and the opportunity for creatives and artists to create new pens and create new things. But after a while, it does seem like a lot. It does seem like a lot. And when you also get to another thing that I'm not a big fan of are the limited editions that create so much FOMO in the community as well. I can understand that with certain limited editions, it's down to materials, or for smaller makers, they're limited in how much they can mass produce something. But when limited editions are basically your whole marketing strategy, for example, Ferris wheel press, they have their core set of inks, but most of the inks that they release end up being limited editions that they release only once and then we never see them again. And I guess in certain areas that strategy works, but it creates that FOMO, which that doesn't sit well with me. But also, when I try to, for example, use inks in my collection that I've had for a while, and I'm using inks from Ferris wheel press that are no longer available, I feel bad that I'm showing these inks that others can't get anymore. But I also don't want to stop using these inks just because they're not available anymore. So there's a whole bunch of feelings associated with the consumerism and the FOMO aspect of it, because I know that like businesses, for example, need to make money. That's how a lot of the world works. And if you have the budget for it and you want to curate your collection that way, by all means do so. But for me personally, it can get really overwhelming. And I'm also the type of person where I'm more of a user than a collector, and my fountain pen collection is made up of pens that I actually use on a day-to-day basis. They're not something that just sit there and collect dust. I want to be able to use my collection. So I want to basically create a habit or a collection for myself that is one, what am I trying to say? Really is one that I use, and not fueled by the next new thing that comes out. And I'm actually sitting here and realizing that I don't have any orders that I'm waiting for to come in the mail. I don't have anything sitting in any carts in any online stores at the moment. I don't have anything on my wish list. Right now, I'm pretty happy with my collection as it is, and I want to appreciate it for what it is. So there's always going to be something new, and we're always, unfortunately, going to feel that fear of missing out, that FOMO, because there is always something new coming out. And I don't have a solution for how we can move past that, unfortunately, but it's something that it's good to be aware of when it comes to your fountain pen collection and your fountain pen ink collection. It's good to be aware of consumerism and FOMO and limited editions and how that affects you. So, all right, that was a lot. I don't normally post videos where I say, I don't hate, because I'm not big on focusing on negatives like that. And it's not that I'm all for like the toxic positivity, but I'm also not for just focusing on the negative. So this was definitely a different type of feel of a video for me, and I appreciate you sticking around. I appreciate Lucy sticking around. I know, sorry to bug you. But if you have any questions or comments regarding anything that I've said today, please let me know. All right, that is it. Thank you all so much for watching, and have yourselves a great day. What are you whining about? I just started. Come here. You just want to be a part of the video now. There we go. All right. Okay. Oh, puppy, we're done.